1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are with us. We are back in at the DFS lab. As always, this show presented by 1 week season, where we build a DraftKings lineup and use it as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. Looking at week 17 right now. I'm your host, Cheeseman. Again, glad that you're with us, and welcoming up Papy now. Papy, how's it going, man? How was last weekend for you in terms of DFS results? And I hope you had a Merry Christmas as well, man.
Yeah, great holiday. Got little boys, and so they had a blast. I'm looking here at all my toys, and my living room is probably going to take a long time
behind the camera, exactly.
Yeah, behind. If I flip the camera around right now, it's nothing but toys. It was a great holiday. Really nice weekend. On Saturday, I won a bunch of tournaments. I posted in the Bink section on OWS, but picked up a bunch of first places.
There you go, man.
Yeah, really big Saturday for me. Ticketed into the main event for another year here. So going to be in the main event for, I think this is my 6th year in a row or something like that in the main event. So excited about that. And then the best ball finals, I made the finals on DraftKings in best ball for the first time that I've made it over there. And then trying to extend my best ball streak of 3 finals in a row in Underdog. I was on the tilt train. I was the mayor of, riding all the way into the mayor of Tilt Town on Saturday for that one, because I got second in my Underdog pod, and I had Josh Jacobs, and I got second by 1 point, and he scored 19 points in the first quarter basically, and I was like, okay, he's definitely gonna get one more point, and then they just took him out of the game for really no reason. And it wasn't like they took any other starters out, and it's not like we don't see NFL coaches play their starters way too deep into games that are blowouts every week of the season. But for some reason they just decided Josh Jacobs wasn't playing in the second half, and really didn't even play in the second quarter. That was definitely riding the tilt train there to miss by 1 point. To make Underdog finals 3 years in a row. But I did make the DraftKings finals, so still made a best ball finals. So, unfortunately, my DraftKings team is pretty beat up. I don't think it's going to threaten them to do much unless I run hot there. But my Underdog team was actually really good. So I wish that one would have made it. But you can't win them all. And maybe I'll run hot in the DraftKings finals.
That's the worst kind of tilt too, because after the first quarter, you're probably like, oh man, I got this, and then it's like slowly this horrible realization begins to creep in of wait, are they going to bring Jacobs back in at all?
Yeah. Oh, I was talking to my one buddy, losing my mind. He was like, dude, you are on tilt. Just I was like, I am. I'm on the train. I was tilting hard that day because I needed 1 point in basically the whole second quarter on, and for him to not play at all. All he had to do was get 15 yards rushing or a catch or anything. And, I pretty much thought I had it, and to not make it on that, I was just like, oh my goodness. And I think the
city right there.
Yeah, it was just tough, man. But you do this long enough, you're gonna have things like that happen. You just have to learn to deal with it, and hope that things bounce your way in another scenario.
Indeed. Cool, man. Yeah, I had last week was pretty solid for me in terms of DFS. I had a legitimate sweat in the afternoon only contest on DraftKings. The main afternoon only contest was actually in first late in those games for just a short time, but was very much live for a $1,000 win at least. So 4-figure win. And then Devon Achane, who was 44% owned in that contest, had a late 50-yard touchdown run that was, pretty much Miami was trying to run out the clock, and Achane just galloped for a 50-yard touchdown run, and that pretty much took me out of contention and pretty much down to just you're thinking hey, I'm gonna get 50x my entry fee here, 20x my entry fee, and then it's oh, I got 3x my entry fee. Awesome. But still, it was good to be live for that, and it was live a little bit on the Christmas slate. So yeah, just I've had a little more time the last couple weeks to do research, so I'm hopefully can keep it rolling. But yeah, man, with that, let's let's jump into DraftKings here. And there's no ownership up really industry wide at this point for the main slate, because most content providers are probably kind of focused on the 3-game slate that's happening tomorrow. And we're recording this, by the way, on Friday morning, December 27th. So we do have some injury situations, but overall, even though we don't have ownership, do you have any sense what ownership, some of the significant ownership pieces could be at this point? even if there's not specific players, like perhaps specific games that are going to be highly owned on this eight game slate. We'll start with that, and then if you don't have anything there, we can move on to just significant injury situations before we jump into the build.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm not an ownership projector, so I don't think that my opinion is necessarily as educated, other than just having played a lot. But yeah, it's interesting where ownership's going to fall, because there's only 8 games, and so you would typically think like, okay, ownership's going to be really condensed, but there's not a lot of obvious plays. In previous weeks, even though there was more games, there were guys where it was just like, okay, well, this guy is such an obvious play, like Gibbs, last Sunday, and Trey McBride, who burned a hole in my Sunday lineups. Yeah, just lit him on fire.
Burned a hole. Such a good,
yeah, he was like 20.
Such a good word picture. Burned a hole in my lineups. I like that's such an accurate way to think about it.
He did, man, just burned a hole right through him. So many otherwise good lineups. So there's not a lot of like really obvious plays this week, in my opinion. So I think that even though it's only an 8-game slate, I think we might see ownership be a little bit more spread out than we've seen in the past couple of weeks with some of the turbo chalk guys. But I do think one guy who will probably be pretty chalky is Chig Okonkwo. That's how you say his name. Yeah. Okonkwo, from Tennessee, and I like him. I will certainly use him probably pretty heavily, but I'm guessing he will be like the chalk cheap tight end of the week, just because he's sort of just way too cheap for his targets the last couple of games, and he's got a great matchup against the Jaguars. But other than him, I'm not really sure where ownership is going to necessarily congregate this week. I don't see a lot of super obvious plays. I mean, I think it's tough to project ownership, because I always am thinking like, what do I like? And then I'm like, well, everybody's going to like what I like, but not always. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. And again, I haven't seen ownership projections like anywhere. I'm guessing Bucky Irving will be somewhat popular, although he's really only playing like 50% of the snaps. But he just has a great matchup. Against Carolina. It seems like whatever running back plays Carolina is always pretty popular. Guessing Brian Thomas Jr. might be popular, but see, I'm not sure how popular he'll be, because the total is so low in that game, and his price has finally come up to being more reasonable. So, I think he's a good play, but will everybody else necessarily think he's a good play? Maybe, as far as running back ownership goes, like to me, when I look at the running backs, there's not a super obvious guy. Jonathan Taylor might be really popular, but he got a big price increase. He does have a great matchup. So I could see him being popular, but, I'm not sure exactly where ownership's going to fall.
Yeah, I mean, even with I'm looking at the team totals, like highest team total on the slate is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 28.5. Then after that, it's the Bills at 28, but the Bills are, who knows like how motivated they'll be. They just need to win, I think, one of the remaining 2, and they're locked into the number 2 seed. I mean, I think the Bills will still try, but sorry, I kind of got distracted by myself there. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, highest team total, but they're kind of pricey. Like some of the plays are kind of pricey. So it's not like you said, there's not just like a screaming value that, this is going to be the chalk play. Like Baker Mayfield is almost 7K. Mike Evans is priced up. Bucky Irving, like you said, he's almost 7K, and he certainly could have a good game, but he isn't playing a huge number of the snaps. The Eagles team total isn't great right now. Other good team totals, man. I mean, it's just next is like Vikings and Packers, but both them have middling team totals as well. So I think you're right. I think that there's actually not as much of an obvious spot as there has been in previous weeks. Any major injury spots that kind of stand out to you? Like, I mean, Anthony Richardson, the questionable tag, I think he could be fairly popular if he, is good to go and announced as he's going to play, like with enough time in advance, not a game time decision. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is a big question mark right now. But what about you? What do you think in terms of injury spots? Anything major?
I mean, if Tony Pollard were to sit, that would probably make Spears relatively chalky, but I don't think
Yes.
Pollard is gonna sit because he hasn't practiced, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks, and he plays every week.
Yeah.
So doesn't make me think he's gonna sit. He would make Spears, like an obvious play if he were to sit. Um, Other than him, I don't know that there's any in particular injuries that are, really where I expect guys to sit. I know Adams. I don't think Adams practiced. Devontae Adams. I don't think he practiced, but I don't think he has, been practicing. I would expect him to probably play.
Yeah, it feels more like maintenance.
Yeah, if he were to sit, Wilson would probably become pretty popular. But yeah, there's not a whole heck of a lot of guys. Thielen. Oh yeah, the Panthers receivers have some question marks. Thielen and Leggett are both, I think, sort of 50-50 iffy. And depending on who plays there, maybe one of them could obviously be good because the Bucks are a pretty good passing game matchup.
Yeah.
So if they both play, or if one of them plays, the other one will become more appealing. So there's some, questions there. And I think they're both sort of looking pretty 50-50. So there's a maybe if they both sit, then like one of the other Panthers cheap receivers like Moore will become,
Coker.
Yeah, or Coker. One of those guys will become chalky. So I think there's some, injury questions, but I don't think there's necessarily a like, okay, well, this guy is sitting, so this guy is automatically chalk. I think the only person in that situation is really Pollard and Spears. I think if Pollard were to sit, Spears would automatically be chalk, but I don't think Pollard's going to sit. So,
any thoughts on what would your thoughts be if Jalen Hurts were to sit for Philly? Does that make you interested in Kenny Pickett at all, or is that a downgrade to that whole offense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a downgrade to the whole offense. I'm really hoping Jalen Hurts plays because he's my quarterback on my best ball final team in DK, and I have him actually stacked with Smith and AJ Brown on that team. So I'm certainly hoping that he plays, but I don't know that he will. And to be honest, I'm a little surprised that it's as iffy with Hurts as it is because he got ruled out of the game with the eye in the sky. It was an eye in the sky, concussion. And it didn't look bad at all, the actual play. And it seemed like he was actually going to come back into that game. And then they sort of like said, oh, no, you can't come back. It almost seemed like a PR NFL type thing where it was like, well, we're just not going to let you because we don't want, the appearances or whatever. So I sort of thought Hurts was going to play this week, but he hasn't, practiced the last 2 weeks. Not that I would expect him to. I think today will be very telling for Hurts. If Hurts has a limited practice today, then he's going to play. If Hurts sits today, then he's not going to play. But the Eagles need this game. And so, it's not a situation where it's like, well, we're just not going to play him because we don't need it. I do think that if Pickett ends up being the guy who starts, it is a major downgrade to the whole offense. I don't think Pickett is really especially great. I think that they'll try to run a lot. Not that they don't always, but I think they'll even be more run oriented if Pickett is the starter. So, could I see taking a swing on Pickett, like, in MME play? Like, sure, like he's cheap. Like you can basically take a swing on any cheap quarterback in MME play, like realistically, but
Right.
Would I want to go there on like a 3-entry max build? Like, no, probably not. It would probably make me just stay away from the whole Eagles offense in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, dude. Well, you ready to jump into this build here? Again, building as we typically do with the Millionaire maker in mind on DraftKings.
Yep.
So yeah, where do you want to start on this one?
All right, so we'll start at running back, and let's go ahead and start with Hall from the Jets. Brees. There we go. Yeah, he's 6,300. He played, I think, 77 or 78% of the snaps last week. So that's basically what he had been playing all year. And he had essentially a normal-ish role. And I feel like, for 6,300 for him in a normal role is sort of stealing. I mean, when we think about where he was drafted in fantasy drafts and sort of the player that he was when he was healthy in the beginning of the year, I mean, he's priced very moderately for a guy that is getting. I think he had if you click on him. I think he had 6 targets last week, which is 6 targets. So which is right back into sort of his normal, like what he was doing before he was healthy, seeing like 4 to 6 targets and like 15 to 20 carries. And so if he's going to have that role, to me, that's a pretty good play at his price. He was a lot more expensive.
Oh yeah, dude, that's right.
So
his price history.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his price history, he's like mid 7Ks. Yeah, like he's over 7,000 and even I think 7,600 somewhat recently. So, I think he's a good deal this week, and I don't know how he'll be viewed by the general public, if people will want to play him or not, or if they'll think he's still hurt, or if they'll just think Buffalo's going to kill them. But Buffalo has been vulnerable to running backs. Also, it's not a brutal matchup. So I think he makes a lot of sense just from a price considered standpoint this week.
Awesome. Yeah, I like Hall a lot, especially his price. If he had kept producing kind of at the levels that he was kind of to start the season, I think he would have been an 8 or 9K back. But just the knee injury had been bothering him, so I think this is a great a buy low spot for Breece Hall. Yeah,
next guy we're going to go with here, running back, is Jerome Ford from the Browns, and this is interesting. It's not a super great matchup, but he is at home, or a home running back, and he's very affordably priced. And he played 80% of the snaps last week, which is actually the most he's played all year. And again, you see the targets are there. I think that in the DTR offense, and again, it was his best game all year last week. He's going to dump it all. He's going to dump him off the ball. They're going to run read option. And if he's going to get 80% of the work, just any running back playing 80% of the snaps that's priced below 6K, you have to consider. And I just think that the offense favors him, with DTR back there, and that if he had been playing, all year, there's no way he'd be priced. If the two factors of DTR had been playing all year and Ford had been getting 80% of the snaps, there's no way he would be priced below 6K. So I think that, looking at those two things and saying, okay, well, those are the factors here. Yeah, Miami's not a super great matchup, but he is still at home. And I think there's supposed to be some cold rain in that game. I don't know if the Dolphins are going to love cold rain in Cleveland. So I feel like that could also just favor him.
Yep, I love that.
All right, so now that we've saved money at our 2 running back positions, let's go ahead and play a guy who I already mentioned and put in Brian Thomas Jr.
Go.
He has just been a target hog since Mac Jones took over. Seeing over 10 targets a game 4 weeks in a row. He's put up over 30 DK points the past 2 weeks. Tennessee is still sort of a pass funnel tendency matchup. I mean, not as extreme as they were, but they do tend to be that way. He got 12 targets against them week 14. So I think that he's still not quite priced up probably as high as he should be for the way that he's being used. Like, he's much more fairly priced now than he was. And I think they probably did that because he was chalky. But he still probably should be higher. So, I'll take the not necessarily discount, because he is, relatively expensive, but for his production the last couple of weeks, I'll say discount, and hope that he just sees another 10 plus targets. I don't see any reason he won't. He has pretty much every game Mac Jones has played. It's interesting. I wrote this game up and I, talked about how the Jaguars seem more willing to throw with Mac Jones than they were with Lawrence, which I don't fully understand, but the Titans are sort of in the exact same boat with Mason Rudolph and Will Levis, is that they seem more willing to throw with Rudolph. So I don't know. I feel like this game could have more throwing. The other thing is he saw those 12 targets against Tennessee in a miserable 10-6 game, where the Titans basically tried to run out the clock on themselves from the opening snap of the game, and did that against the Jaguars' horrific pass defense.
Yeah, I remember that, man.
Totally illogical coaching. So if you read my write up of that game, I was not super kind to Callahan in that write up, and it's because he's an idiot. So it's just it just is what it is. But I think that you're going to see a lot more throwing in that game than we saw last time, and he saw 12 targets. So I feel like he's probably going to see that again.
Love it, dude. Yeah, I think Thomas is man, the production he's been putting up recently, his profile seems like his price is only due to rise higher from here going forward. All right, dude. So we got 3 spots in so far. Where do you want to go next?
All right, next person, let's do a little mini correlation. Another guy I talked about already is Chig. Let's get him in there at Chig, such a great name. Get him in there at tight end. He's seen over 10 targets the past 2 weeks with Rudolph at quarterback. You feel almost obligated to play some pass catcher against the Jaguars. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, assuming Callahan comes out and decides to throw against them, which, hopefully he's learned his lesson, but we'll see. But you feel almost obligated to play somebody against them. And he's too cheap. He should have been priced up. He's still sort of in the punt territory. He is one of the most athletic tight ends in the league. I loved him actually in yearly and in best ball. I had a ton of him and they ignored him all year for no real reason other than Callahan's an idiot, which I've already said. I won't say it again. I got it in twice. And, now they're starting to finally use him sort of in the passing game. So, great that he's being used finally and he's capitalized both weeks. So I don't see any reason that he wouldn't, see another 10 targets. So like him a lot this week. He'll probably be chalky, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to have a chalk element in there.
That you do.
All right. Now let's go ahead and get to our game stacks. So the game of the week for me, and this is the game I'm probably going to be stacking on my main event build, is the Packers-Vikings game. And, number one, doesn't have weather concerns, obviously. And the number 2 thing is, go ahead, we're going to play Jordan Love. This is something I think is really interesting. Go look at Love's box scores. So if you look at his passing attempts, the Packers have been very run-heavy this year. And you can see they haven't thrown over 30 times in anything that you have to scroll down to find it. But look at week 4 against the Vikings. They threw 54 times. That is such an outlier for the rest of the season. I mean, there's not another game where they threw anywhere near that much. And it was a 29-31 competitive game. I do think this game will be competitive. But that outlier passing to him, it was by far his best fantasy day of the year. You can see he scored 34 points despite throwing 3 interceptions. That to me sort of indicates that they are going to come in with a pass first game plan, that they did it last time. And the Vikings make sense to throw against. They're absolutely smothering against the run, and they're good against the pass, but that's the one place you can sort of hurt their defense is throwing. And so if the Packers figured that out in week 4 and threw 54 times, I'm willing to say that that's just how they think they should approach this game. And they're going to do it again. So I like Love this week. He's almost certain, and he's not expensive.
Nope.
And I think that the other part of it is too, that he's 6,200, and all the other quarterbacks that are cheap, that are a little bit cheaper than him in the 5K range, I think are worse players. He's not a backup. He's a starter. He's a good player. The only reason that he doesn't have a lot more fantasy production this year is they just really haven't thrown. And so if they throw 50 times again, I think he's gonna have a good game.
Yep, absolutely love that shout. I'm all over that game as well. I think also the Vikings, I think you mentioned this, Vikings are tough to run against. And so I think that this game, like with the fact that you have playmakers all over the field, Justin Jefferson, Jaden Reed, just explosive playmakers, as long as this game gets that little bit of a spark, I absolutely could see the Packers throwing a bunch again in this spot.
Yep, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to pair him with Reed, his main threat here. And if you go ahead, if you look at Reed, look at his scores again, you can scroll down to week 4 and you can see What do you know? His best game of the year by far. When you throw 50 times, a good chance that your top receiver might have his best game. And it seemed like in the first week they really wanted to attack, the middle of the field. I guess he did hurt the Eagles week 1 too, there, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, he had
that was
36, but this is his second best game in terms of
Rushing.
fantasy, and one of his only
Rushing.
2 over 20.
He broke a
right.
broke a long run that game. So from a receiving standpoint, that was the Vikings game was his
33-yard touchdown run. Yeah.
So just clearly one of his best outings there, week 4. And I think that, again, if I'm going to play Love, I'm going to stack him with somebody. I'm not going Christian Watson. I might finally have given up on the Christian Watson train. I was the biggest Christian Watson apologist for, his whole career up until this point. I might have finally given up on him. The dude is just made of glass. He's one of those guys where just every single time that he falls down, you're like, oh, well, you're not getting up. That's it. So,
Anthony Davis of the NFL.
Yeah. And Reed is a good player. And again, he's priced very, very moderately. I mean, he's not over $6K for a guy that, probably will function as their wide receiver 1 there. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring it back with Justin Jefferson. So we've saved money. We don't have any really expensive guys in there. We're going to go ahead and play Jefferson. I don't know how much I really need to justify playing Justin Jefferson. If you think that that game is going to be a high-scoring game, then he probably has a good chance of getting involved. And Addison has really come on lately, but Addison's price has come up significantly in the last couple of weeks. And if you find Addison, he's at over 6K now, and I don't know that he's been that high for most of the year. So. Justin Jefferson is sort of priced where he's been priced. He's Justin Jefferson. If he puts up 40 points, is anyone going to be shocked? Just to bet on game environment there and saying like, okay, well, if I'm stacking this game, I'll take Jefferson. That's really, really all there is to that. And now the last 2 spots, and these are 2 spots that I debate sort of one final switch based on injury news, and I'll show you both of them. But for the first one, we'll go ahead and we'll put in Kraft at the flex. So this would be obviously the double stack here, bringing him in there. He had a nice game against the Vikings in week 4 also. And, I think that he could just be, again, we're playing that game environment. We're saying they're going to throw 50 times. So playing 2 of their receivers makes sense. And playing him allows you to play the Eagles defense, who I'm not sure why the Eagles defense isn't a little more expensive, but whatever. They're 3,100. They're at home. They're playing a backup quarterback and a game that they need. And, they've been awesome. The Eagles defense has been one of the best defenses in the league. So I think they make a lot of sense this week. They're definitely probably my favorite defense. But the one switch that I'm sort of debating here at the end, and I'll show the other one here, is if you were to take out Kraft and go put in Leggett from the Panthers. And this is why I say this is somewhat injury dependent. And with this, you'd want to play the Raiders defense. And not that the Raiders defense has been amazing, but they have been better the last couple of weeks. And New Orleans offense just looks, my goodness, does it look horrific. I mean, seriously,
terrible.
Rattler just does not look like he belongs in the NFL. And so, playing any defense against him is fine. I mean, you could literally play any defense against him. And this is sort of a injury news type situation. I mean, I like playing receivers against the Bucs, but it will sort of come down to who play. I mean, depending on if Leggett plays, and again, if Thielen plays or who exactly plays there, but he could end up being sort of the wide receiver 1 in a great matchup against the Bucs. Yeah. So I think he makes sense there. But those two switches, I think for the purpose of this, I'll say go with Kraft, and play the Eagles defense. Go with the double stack here since we're building for the Millie Maker, and typically in that type of a contest, you'd want to double stack and just say that game goes crazy. So I would set it up that way for this, but I think either of those options are pretty viable. And, I like this lineup. Very, often when I'm building lineups on our pod, I'm building for the $20 Millie Maker. So I'm sort of taking more risks or being a little bit different. But this one I like. I may end up playing this as my main event lineup. I'm not sure of that. Obviously things change in the days leading up to the final lock, but I do like the look of this one a little bit more than in terms of just being a smaller field tournament lineup than maybe I have in the past with some other ones we've built.
Absolutely, dude. I absolutely love that. Yeah, dude, good luck on the main event this weekend. So the final lineup we did land on was Jordan Love double stacked with Kraft and Jaden Reed, and then filled out with Breece Hall and Ford at the running back positions, Jerome Ford, and then Brian Thomas Jr., Justin Jefferson on the bringback from that stack, Chico Conquo, Eagles defense, but with the caveat that you could flip out the Eagles and Kraft for the Raiders and Xavier Legette for the Panthers. Pappy, great stuff as always. Anything else you want to add before we ship this one off?
No, I mean, happy holidays to everyone. I hope everyone had a great whatever holiday is your holiday of choice, and I hope everybody has a great New Year's. And we'll see everybody in 2025. I guess the one time I get to say see y'all next year.
Yes, that's right. See y'all next year. Have a good weekend, guys. Hope for success on the DFS streets. And Pappy, we'll talk to you next time.
See you guys.